I expected the sharpest pain to be a slamming door, but he stood politely in the way and told me I was not family. The true horror was seeing my mother behind him, smiling, like everything was going according to plan. I did not cry. I simply walked to my car, opened a group chat I had drafted months ago, and hit send. 5 minutes later, their perfect dinner party began to crumble. My name is Camilla Bishop, and I had spent 34 years trying to buy a ticket to a show that had been sold out since the day I was born. The admission price today was a $60 bottle of Pinot Noir and a swallow of pride that tasted like battery acid. I parked my sedan at the bottom of the driveway because the circular drive at the top was already full of luxury SUVs. That was standard protocol. The architecture of Greystone Ridge was designed to intimidate. It was a neighborhood where the lawns were manicured with nail scissors and the mailboxes cost more than my first car. The house itself loomed at the top of the hill, a sprawling colonial revival with white pillars that looked like teeth. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lipstick was red. My hair was pulled back. I looked successful. I looked stable. I looked like someone who belonged at the table. I grabbed the wine from the passenger seat and stepped out into the biting November wind. The air smelled of wood smoke and dried leaves. That quintessential American autumn scent that usually signals comfort. To me, it smelled like anxiety. I walked up the driveway. My heels clicked a rhythmic, lonely beat on the asphalt. I could see the golden glow spilling out from the bay windows. Inside, silhouettes moved back and forth. I could hear the muffled sound of laughter. It was a rich, full sound, the kind of laughter that comes from people who have never had to worry about whether their heating bill would clear. It sounded like a performance. I reached the front porch. The wreath on the door was enormous, made of dried corn husks and silk ribbons in burnt orange. It was perfect. Everything about the Harlan household was aggressively perfect. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold air, trying to slow my heart rate. Just get through dinner, I told myself. Eat the turkey. Compliment the decor. Ignore the barbs. Leave by 8. I reached for the polished brass handle. I never touched it. The door swung inward before my fingers could make contact. It did not open wide in welcome. It opened just enough to fill the frame with a man's body. Wayne Harlan stood there, my stepfather. He was wearing a cashmere sweater the color of oatmeal and dark slacks that held a razor-sharp crease. He looked like the patriarch in a pharmaceutical commercial. The kind of man you trust with your investment portfolio. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand. The ice cubes clinked softly, the only sound in the sudden silence between us. I stepped forward, instinctively, a smile already plastered on my face. "Hi, Wayne. Happy thanks?" He did not move. He did not step back to let me in. He planted his feet on the threshold, effectively blocking the entrance. He looked down at me, his expression entirely neutral. There was no anger in his eyes. There was no malice. There was only a profound, bureaucratic indifference. "You are not family," Wayne said. The words hung in the cold air. He said it so calmly, like he was informing me that the library was closed on Sundays or that my credit card had been declined. I blinked. My brain stuttered, trying to process the sentence. "What?" "You are not family," he repeated, the volume of his voice unchanged. "Not tonight." I felt the bottle of wine grow heavy in my hand. I tried to look past him, desperate for a witness, desperate for someone to tell me this was a joke. Over the curve of his shoulder, I had a clear line of sight into the dining room. The chandelier was fully lit, casting a brilliant sparkle over the crystal and china. The table was set for 12. The centerpiece was a cornucopia spilling over with pomegranates and grapes. And there was my mother. Kara stood at the head of the table. She was wearing a silk dress in emerald green, her blonde hair coiffed into a motionless wave. She was looking right at the door. She saw Wayne blocking me. She saw me standing in the cold. She did not rush forward. She did not look confused. She smiled. It was a small, tight smile, the kind she used when a dinner party was going exactly according to schedule. She reached out with a manicured hand and picked up a place card from the table. I knew that card. I knew it had my name on it in calligraphy. She didn't throw it away. She didn't tear it up. She simply slid the heavy dining chair back, the legs scraping silently against the rug, and moved it. She placed the chair directly in front of the setting next to her, and then she placed the card down in front of it. Then, she turned to the living room and waved her hand. Evan, my younger sister's fiancé, walked into the frame. He looked distinctively uncomfortable in a stiff blazer. My mother patted the back of the chair she had just moved, my chair, and gestured for him to sit. She was not just removing me, she was replacing me. She was upgrading the seating chart like I was a canceled reservation. The cruelty of it was so precise it was almost breathtaking. I looked back at Wayne. He was watching me closely, his eyes narrowing slightly. I knew what he was waiting for. He was waiting for the explosion. He wanted me to scream. He wanted me to try to push past him. He wanted me to cry and beg and make a scene so he could turn to the guests inside and say, "See? She is unstable. She is ruining the holiday. We had to keep her out for everyone's safety." He wanted the narrative. I felt a scream clawing its way up my throat, hot and jagged. I felt the sting of tears pricking the corners of my eyes. I wanted to smash the bottle of Pinot Noir against the brickwork. I wanted to burn the wreath, but I looked at his face, smug and expectant, and I realized that giving him what he wanted would cost me everything. I swallowed the scream. I forced the tears back down. I straightened my spine until it hurt. "Okay," I said. The word was soft, barely a whisper. Wayne blinked. The ice in his glass shifted. He looked disappointed. For a fraction of a second, his composure faltered. He hadn't written a line of dialogue for this reaction. I didn't give him time to recover. I nodded once, sharp and businesslike. Then I turned around. I walked down the brick steps. 1, 2, 3. I walked back down the long, paved driveway. I did not run. I did not look back. I could feel his eyes on my back, burning like a laser, but I kept my pace steady. The wind whipped my hair across my face, but I didn't brush it away. I felt light. I felt untethered. It was a terrifying sensation, like being an astronaut whose cable has just been cut, drifting out into the black void. I reached my car and opened the door. The interior was freezing, but it felt safer than the warm glow of the house. I slid into the driver's seat and pulled the door shut. The sound of the latch clicking was final. Through the windshield, the house looked like a diorama in a museum. It was beautiful and dead. I could see the shadows moving in the dining room. They were sitting down now. They were unfolding their napkins. They were pouring the wine. They were beginning the performance of the happy family, cleansed of the one stain that refused to blend in. I placed the unopened bottle of wine on the passenger seat. Then, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. I opened the messaging app. There was a group chat sitting at the top of the list. I had created it 3 months ago, on a night when I had cried myself to sleep on my bathroom floor. It was titled simply, "Family Updates." The recipients included everyone currently sitting at that dining table. My Aunt Patrice, my grandmother Maggie, my cousins, the neighbors who were invited for dessert, and Evan. I had spent weeks drafting the message. I had spent hours curating the attachments, audio files, video clips, screenshots with timestamps. It was an autopsy of their lies, categorized and indexed. I looked up at the house one last time. I saw my mother raise her glass in a toast. I looked down at the screen. I typed a single sentence to precede the files. "If you are at that table, you deserve the truth." I pressed send. The progress bar zipped across the screen. Delivered. I sat in the dark, watching the windows of the house on the hill. The fuse was lit. It would take them a moment to notice. Someone's phone would buzz, then another, then the silence would break. I wasn't family. Wayne was right about that. I was the reckoning. I spent my entire childhood feeling like a rough draft that my mother had scribbled out in a hurry, realizing her mistakes only after the ink had dried. She could not erase me, so she simply turned the page and started over with a fresh sheet of paper. That fresh sheet was my sister, Bryn. Bryn was the final copy. She was the hardcover edition with the glossy jacket, the one you display on the coffee table. I was the paperback with the typo on page 3 that you shoved to the back of the shelf. It is a strange thing to grow up in a house where you are technically fed and clothed and sheltered, yet you know, with absolute biological certainty, that you are being tolerated rather than cherished. It was never overt abuse. There were no wire hangers or locked closets. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, administered daily with a smile. My mother had a memory like a steel trap for my failures. She could recall the time I spilled grape juice on the beige carpet in 1999 with forensic accuracy. She could recite the details of a math test I failed in the 7th grade as if it had happened yesterday. Yet, if I mentioned my promotion to senior analyst or the fact that I had bought my own condo without a co-signer, her eyes would glaze over. She would nod vaguely and ask if I had remembered to send a birthday card to a distant aunt I hadn't seen in a decade. Bryn, on the other hand, lived in a world without consequences. She was the biological daughter of the union between Kara and Wayne, the physical manifestation of their perfect second act. If Bryn wrecked her car, it was the road's fault. If she failed a class, the professor was biased. If she snapped at me during dinner, she was just tired. If I snapped back, I was hysterical. "You are so sensitive, Camila," my mother would say, sighing as if my emotions were a heavy piece of luggage she was forced to carry. "Why do you always have to make everything so heavy?" Then there was Wayne. My stepfather did not raise his voice. Men who yell are easy to categorize. You know where the danger line is because they scream it at you. Wayne was far more effective. He controlled the climate of our home with his eyebrows. A slight furrow meant I was speaking too loudly. A narrowing of the eyes meant my opinion was unwelcome. He had a weaponized phrase that he deployed whenever I tried to advocate for myself or express a grievance. "Don't ruin the mood, Camilla." It was his mantra. It didn't matter if Bryn had just insulted me or if my mother had just made a cutting remark about my weight or my career. If I reacted, I was the one ruining the mood. I was the disruption in the force field of their denial. I learned very quickly that the price of admission to the Harlan family was my silence. I learned to shrink. I learned to apologize before I had even done anything wrong. Just to smooth the waters, I became an expert at the fake smile, the nod, the swallowing of my own reality until I felt like I was choking on it. The only person who saw the strings being pulled was my cousin Jenna. Jenna was the black sheep of the extended family, mostly because she refused to dye her wool white to match the rest of the flock. She was 5 years older than me, sharp-tongued, and observant in a way that made people uncomfortable. She didn't play the game. "You know they treat you like a rental car, right?" Jenna told me once. We were hiding in the kitchen during a 4th of July barbecue, watching Wayne hold court by the grill. "They use you when they need an extra seat filled or someone to drive Grandma to the podiatrist, but they don't actually care about the mileage." "It's not that bad." I had lied, instinctively defending them. "It is that bad," Jenna countered, popping a deviled egg into her mouth. "Wayne looks at you like you're an audit notice, and your mom looks at you like she's waiting for you to apologize for existing. Stop trying to earn their love. Cammy, you can't buy bread at a hardware store." I didn't listen to her then. I thought I could fix it with distance and success. I moved out the second I graduated high school. I put myself through college with loans and waitressing jobs, refusing to ask Wayne for a dime because I knew money from him came with invisible chains. I built a career in compliance and auditing, a job that required me to look for inconsistencies, to find the truth buried in mountains of paperwork. I thought that if I became successful, stable, and independent, they would finally see me as an adult. They would finally respect me. I was wrong. My independence didn't make them respect me. It just made me convenient. They liked that I didn't ask for money. They liked that I showed up on holidays with expensive wine and didn't cause a scene. They leveraged my silence to maintain their image of a cohesive, happy family. I was a prop. I was the extra in the movie of Bryn's life. The breaking point didn't happen with a bang. It happened on a Tuesday evening in August, 3 months before the door was blocked. I had come over to drop off some paperwork for my grandmother. Maggie. The house was quiet. The French doors leading to the patio were open, and the summer breeze carried voices into the hallway where I stood. Unseen. My mother and Wayne were sitting on the patio drinking iced tea. They were talking about the upcoming holidays. Camila asked if she could bring a dessert this year, my mother said. Her voice sounded exhausted, as if the mere request was a burden. She always makes those complicated tarts. It is so performative. She thrives on the attention, Wayne replied. His voice was smooth, dismissive, the sound of a judge delivering a verdict. She needs everyone to look at her and say, "Oh, poor Camilla. She tries so hard. It is exhausting." I froze. My hand gripped the manila envelope I was holding until the paper crinkled. "I know," my mother sighed. "I just do not want any drama this year. Bryn is bringing Evan, and I want it to be perfect. You know how Camilla gets. She sits there with that martyr look on her face." "Let her play victim," Wayne said. I could hear the clink of ice in his glass. "As long as she stays out of the way. Let her have her little tragic backstory. If she starts acting up, we will just cut her off. She is desperate to belong. She will take whatever scraps we give her. Let her play victim." The words hit me harder than a physical blow. All those years I thought I was being good. All those years I thought I was keeping the peace. They didn't see me as a peacemaker. They saw me as a pathetic, attention-seeking actress playing a role they graciously allowed. They were not oblivious to my pain. They were banking on it. They knew I was desperate for their approval, and they were using that desperation to control me. I did not walk out onto the patio. I did not confront them. I placed the envelope on the hall table, turned around, and walked out of the house. That was the night the crying stopped. That was the night the auditor took over. I realized that memory is a fickle thing in the Harlan house. They relied on gaslighting, on rewriting history the moment it happened. I never said that. You are imagining things. You are being hysterical. They could only do that because there was no record. It was my word against their united front. So, I decided to change the medium. I stopped arguing. I stopped trying to explain my feelings. Instead, I started hitting record on my phone whenever I walked into a room with them. I saved voicemails. I took screenshots of text messages before they could be deleted. I dug through public records. I applied the same forensic scrutiny to my family that I applied to failing corporations at work. I wasn't gathering evidence for revenge. Not at first. I was gathering it for sanity. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. I needed to know that when they said I was imagining the cruelty, the digital timestamp proved otherwise. I became a ghost in their machine. I smiled when Wayne made his passive-aggressive comments, and then I went to my car and uploaded the audio file to a cloud drive. I nodded when my mother criticized my clothes, and then I archived her text messages. They thought they were managing me. They thought I had finally learned my place. They didn't realize that by dismissing me as not family, they had freed me from the obligation of protecting them. They thought I was a harmless, desperate stray dog waiting for scraps. They had no idea I was building a case file. The vibration of my phone on the granite countertop sounded like a drill in the quiet of my apartment. It was 10 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day. The Macy's parade was on the television in the background, a low hum of brass bands and cheerful commentary that felt entirely disconnected from my reality. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at a half-packed bag, debating whether to fake a migraine or a flat tire. Then the screen lit up with a text from Jenna. "You are coming. I saved you a seat." I stared at the words for a long time. In any other family, this would be a mundane confirmation. In the Harlan family, it was a subversive act. Seats were not saved for me. They were grudgingly allocated at the far end of the table, usually near a drafty window or next to a distant relative who wanted to talk about their gout. For Jenna to actively claim space for me was a declaration of war against the carefully curated seating chart my mother spent weeks agonizing over. My thumbs hovered over the glass. I typed out a response. "I think I'm going to pass. I do not have the energy for the performance today." I watched the 3 dots of her typing bubble appear immediately. She didn't let me off the hook. "Then do not perform," she wrote back. Just show up. Do not pretend today. Do not pretend. The command settled in my chest, heavy and terrifying. I deleted my excuse and typed a single word. Okay. I grabbed my keys and the bottle of wine I had bought the day before. It was a nice Pinot Noir, rated 92 points. Expensive enough to be polite, but not so expensive that it looked like I was trying to buy their affection. I knew the rules. I also picked up a small gift bag containing a box of peppermint bark from a local chocolatier. It was for my grandmother, Maggie. She was the matriarch of the family, the one whose old money had paid for the down payment on the Greystone Ridge house. Yet she was treated more like a family heirloom than a person, dusted off and displayed when company came, but otherwise kept on a shelf. The drive to my mother's house usually took 45 minutes. Today, the roads were relatively empty. Just a few stragglers rushing to get to dinners with foil-covered casseroles in their back seats. I drove in silence, the radio off, my mind working through a different kind of noise. I work as a senior auditor for the Crown Line Compliance Bureau. It is a fictional-sounding name for a very real, very boring job that involves looking at stacks of corporate documents and finding the rot hidden underneath. I am paid to notice when the numbers look too round, when the dates on signatures do not quite line up, when a sudden flurry of administrative activity happens right before a quarterly loss is announced. My boss always says that fraud does not smell like garbage. It smells like bleach. It smells like someone cleaning up a mess you did not know existed. And lately, my mother's conversations had smelled like bleach. For the past 2 months, Kara had been casually dropping mentions of getting affairs in order. It was subtle. She would mention it while complaining about the traffic or discussing the weather. I finally went over to Mom's and organized that disaster of a home office, she had said on the phone 3 weeks ago. So much paper. We shredded bags of it. It is so much cleaner now. At the time, I had just hummed in agreement, but now, as the highway markers flashed by, the auditor in my brain was waking up. My mother hated paperwork. She hated filing. She hired people to do her taxes, her party planning, and her grocery shopping. The idea of Kara spending a weekend hunched over a shredder out of the goodness of her heart was statistically impossible. Then I remembered the Sunday dinner last month. I had been sitting next to Grandma Maggie on the patio. She was 82, frail but sharp, though her short-term memory had started to fray around the edges like an old hem. She had gripped my wrist with a hand that felt like dry parchment paper. "Camila," she had whispered, leaning in close so the smell of her lavender soap filled my nose. "I feel like I'm signing my name all day long. Do I usually sign this much?" Before I could ask her what she was signing, a shadow had fallen over us. Wayne had appeared, holding a platter of grilled vegetables. "Mom, you are confusing the crossword puzzles with legal documents again," he had said, his voice dripping with that patronizing, chuckle-headed patience he used for the elderly and the emotional. He looked at me and winked, a gesture that made my skin crawl. "She has been obsessed with her autograph lately. Sundowning, you know?" I had let it go. I had let him explain it away because I was trained to avoid conflict, to not ruin the mood, but now, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The pieces were clicking together. The sudden interest in organization, the shredding, Maggie's confusion, Wayne's hovering presence whenever Maggie was speaking to anyone outside the immediate circle. They were moving assets. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was not just about the dinner. It was not just about excluding me because I was awkward or negative. They were curating the guest list to control the witnesses. If I was not there, I could not ask Maggie questions. If I was not there, I could not see the papers. I looked at the passenger seat. The peppermint bark seemed pathetic now. I wasn't just going there to eat turkey and endure insults. I was going into a crime scene. I turned off the highway and began the ascent up the winding roads of Greystone Ridge. The houses got larger, the lawns greener, the fences higher. It was a neighborhood that projected stability and old-fashioned values. The kind of place where scandals were suffocated by non-disclosure agreements and heavy velvet drapes. I pulled up to the house. The driveway was already packed with cars. There was Wayne's pristine sedan, my mother's luxury SUV, and Evan's sports car. The windows of the house were glowing with warm, golden light. I could imagine the scene inside. The smell of roasting turkey, savory sage stuffing, and caramelized onions would be heavy in the air. The football game would be murmuring on the television in the den, the Detroit Lions losing, as was tradition. I checked my makeup in the visor mirror. I looked calm. I looked professional. I did not look like a daughter coming home. I looked like an investigator arriving for a site visit. Just get through the door, I whispered to myself. Get to Jenna. Get to Maggie. I thought the hardest part would be sitting at the table, enduring the 1,000 tiny cuts of their exclusion. I thought the battle would be verbal, a snide comment about my job, a passive-aggressive remark about my single status. I was prepared for that. I had my armor on. I was ready to smile, deflect, and observe. I grabbed the wine and the gift bag. I walked up the driveway, counting the steps. I had no idea that they had already anticipated my arrival. I had no idea that they knew exactly what I was, a risk factor, and that they had decided the best way to handle a risk was to eliminate its access entirely. I reached for the handle, thinking I was walking into a social minefield. I did not know I was about to walk into a wall. I parked my sedan 3 houses down the hill, wedged between a contractor's truck and a fire hydrant. It was the same spot I had occupied for the last 4 years. The driveway was technically full, but we all knew that if my sister Bryn had arrived in a semi-truck, my stepfather would have paved over the lawn to accommodate her. My exclusion began in the asphalt and ended at the dinner table. I walked up the incline, clutching the neck of the Pinot Noir bottle like a baton. The wind had picked up, stripping the last of the dead leaves from the oaks that lined the street. The air around the Harlan house was thick with the scent of performative domesticity. It smelled of sage, roasted garlic, and cinnamon, a heavy, buttery aroma that felt designed to advertise happiness to the neighbors. Through the walls, I could hear the muffled rhythm of laughter. It was synchronized, rising and falling at appropriate intervals, sounding less like a family gathering and more like a television sitcom filmed before a live studio audience. I reached the front porch and paused. The door was flanked by 2 narrow panels of decorative frosted glass, but there was a clear spot near the top of the right panel where the frosting had been scratched away years ago. I instinctively glanced through it, a habit from my teenage years when I used to check Wayne's mood before entering the house. The foyer was brightly lit. On the mahogany console table, right beneath the mirror that cost more than my first 2 cars combined, sat a stack of papers. They were not magazines or holiday cards. They were legal documents, bound in a blue backing that I recognized instantly from my work. A clipboard rested on top of them, and a heavy fountain pen lay uncapped next to it. My auditor's brain fired a warning shot. Why are there contracts in the foyer on Thanksgiving? Before I could focus on the text, a hand swept into the frame. It was Wayne. He didn't pick up the papers. He threw a beige cashmere scarf over them, obscuring the blue folders completely. It was a quick, jerky motion, entirely at odds with his usual languid grace. He looked up, his eyes locking onto the slice of clear glass where I stood. He saw me. He knew I had seen the table. The door did not swing open in welcome. It opened only enough to accommodate the width of his shoulders. Wayne Harlan stood on the threshold, his body effectively sealing the entrance. He was not holding a drink this time. His hands were empty, hanging loosely by his sides, but his posture was rigid. "Hi, Wayne," I began, the automatic greeting tasting like ash in my mouth. "I brought the—" "You are not family," he interrupted. His voice was terrifyingly level. It was not a shout. It was a policy statement. "Not tonight." My eyes darted past his shoulder. The open concept layout of the house meant the foyer bled directly into the dining room. The scene was set with military precision. The china gleamed under the chandelier. The candles were lit. And there, near the center of the table, was a single empty chair. It was my chair. I knew it was mine because it was the one placed awkwardly near the leg of the table, the spot where you had to straddle the wood to sit down. My mother, Kara, was standing right behind it. She did not look at the door. She did not look at Wayne. She certainly did not look at me. She was looking at the place setting, with a fluid, practiced motion. She reached down and picked up the tinted name card that read, Camila. She didn't crumple it. She didn't look at it with regret. She simply slid it into the pocket of her dress as if it were a piece of lint she had found on the tablecloth. Then, she grabbed the back of the chair, my chair, and dragged it 2 feet to the right. She positioned it directly next to her own seat, closing the gap. "Evan, honey," she called out. Her voice carried clearly to the doorway. It was warm, sweet, and utterly toxic. "Sit here next to me. The lighting is better." I watched Evan, my sister's fiancé, hesitate. He looked toward the door, catching a glimpse of me standing in the cold behind Wayne's shoulder. He looked confused, his brow furrowing as he processed the scene. I saw him mouth the word, "Camila?" "Mom, it is fine," Bryn's voice floated out from the kitchen. She walked into the dining room carrying a basket of rolls, looking radiant and completely unbothered. "Just sit, Evan. The turkey is resting." "It is fine." The phrase hit me harder than the cold wind. My absence wasn't a problem to be solved. It was an administrative error that had just been corrected. To Bryn, removing me was no different than removing an extra fork that cluttered the table. Wayne was watching my face closely. I could see the tension in his jaw. He was waiting for the scene. He needed me to push the door. He needed me to raise my voice. He needed me to demand to speak to my grandmother. If I shouted, he could close the door and tell everyone inside that I was drunk, that I was hysterical, that I was dangerous. He needed a reason to justify the lock he had put on the evening. He wanted the crazy daughter, so he could hide the corrupt executor. I tightened my grip on the wine bottle. The glass was cold against my palm. 1,000 scream-filled sentences ran through my mind. I wanted to ask about the blue folders under the scarf. I wanted to scream for Maggie, but the auditor in me took over. "Don't give them the data they want," I told myself. "Give them nothing." I looked Wayne dead in the eye. I let my face go completely slack, erasing every trace of hurt, anger, or confusion. "Okay," I said. The word hung in the air, simple and devastatingly flat. Wayne blinked, his head cocked slightly to the side, a microscopic crack in his facade. He hadn't prepared for okay. He had prepared for a fight. My acceptance denied him the climax he had scripted. I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned on my heel, the movement sharp and deliberate. I walked down the brick steps, careful not to stumble. I could feel his gaze burning into the back of my coat, confused and wary. He didn't close the door immediately. He stood there watching, waiting for me to turn back and throw a rock, or scream, or do something that fit the character they had written for me. I kept walking. I reached the bottom of the driveway where the shadows were deep. I looked down at the bottle of wine in my hand. It felt ridiculous. A heavy glass artifact from a civilization I had been exiled from. I felt like a delivery driver who had arrived with a package only to be told that the residents had moved away years ago without leaving a forwarding address. I reached my car and unlocked it. The chirping sound of the alarm disengaging echoed loudly in the quiet street. I opened the door and sat in the driver's seat. But I didn't start the engine. I looked up at the house. Wayne had finally closed the door. The barrier was complete. Inside, they were likely laughing, clinking glasses, relieved that the mood had been preserved. They thought the problem was outside, shivering in a sedan. They were wrong. The problem was sitting in my passenger seat in the form of a smartphone. And the story they were trying so hard to protect was about to be rewritten. I wasn't just a rejected daughter anymore. I was a witness who had just been denied entry to the crime scene, and that was all the confirmation I needed. The engine of my car was off, but the cabin was still holding on to the last vestiges of heat. I sat in the darkness 3 houses down, my phone glowing in my lap like a shard of radioactive glass. It was the only light in the car, illuminating my face in a ghostly blue. I opened the messaging app. The group chat I had created months ago was sitting there, dormant and loaded. I had named it simply Thanksgiving Logistics to ensure no one would block it prematurely. The participant list was a carefully curated roster of the people in that house who still possessed a conscience. There was Jenna, my cousin and my only ally. There was Aunt Patrice, a woman who valued etiquette but valued integrity more. There was my grandmother, Maggie, whose eyesight was failing, but whose phone was always set to maximum volume. There were 3 of my cousins who were currently sitting at the kids' table, despite being in their 20s. There were the neighbors, the Millers, who had been invited for dessert, and there was Evan. My thumb hovered over his name. Adding him felt like pulling the pin on a grenade that was strapped to someone else's chest. He was an innocent bystander in this war, a man who thought he was marrying into a family of upstanding citizens, but the auditor in me knew that ignorance is not a defense. If he was going to sign a contract with this family, he needed to read the fine print. I attached the file. It was 5 minutes and 12 seconds long. It was a compilation of audio recordings, video clips, and screenshots, all meticulously time-stamped and organized. It was not a rant. It was not an emotional plea. It was data. I typed a single line of text to accompany the file. If you are at that table, you deserve the truth. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. I looked up at the house. The bay window of the dining room framed them perfectly. They looked like actors on a stage, frozen in a tableau of forced merriment. My mother was laughing at something Wayne had said. Bryn was leaning into Evan, whispering in his ear. I looked back down. I pressed send. The progress bar zipped across the screen. The word delivered appeared. For a moment, nothing happened. The signal had to travel up the hill, through the walls, and into the pockets and purses of the people inside. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, then the choreography of the dinner party broke. It started with a ripple. I saw Jenna reach into her blazer pocket. She frowned, looking at the screen. A second later, Aunt Patrice reached for her purse, which was hanging on the back of her chair. Then one of the cousins at the end of the table picked up his phone. The dining room transformed from a Rockwell painting into a study of modern confusion. The synchronized eating stopped. The laughter died. Inside that digital file, they were hearing the voice of Wayne Harlan, recorded 3 weeks ago in the kitchen while I stood silently in the hallway. The audio was crisp. If Camilla shows up, block her, Wayne's voice said, devoid of any warmth. She changes the optics. We cannot have her moping around while we are trying to close the deal with Evan's father. Then, the recording cut to my mother's voice. It was a video clip taken from a distance, but her face was clear. She was arranging flowers and smiling. She will make it about her, Kara said, laughing lightly. She always does. Just tell her we are doing a small dinner. She is used to being left out. She is resilient like a cockroach. I watched through the windshield as the reactions hit. Jenna was the first to move. I saw her stand up so abruptly that her chair tipped backward. She didn't bother to catch it. She held her phone up, the screen bright against her face. Her expression was not one of confusion. It was one of fury. She looked directly at Wayne, said something sharp and violent, and then turned her back on him. Wayne was still sitting, a look of bewildered annoyance on his face. He hadn't checked his phone yet. He didn't know the perimeter had been breached. He gestured at Jenna, likely telling her to sit down, to not ruin the mood. Then Aunt Patrice stood up. Patrice was a woman who moved with the slow, deliberate gravity of a glacier. She placed her napkin on the table. She picked up her phone and held it out toward my mother. I could not hear the words through the brick and glass, but I could read the body language. Patrice was shaking her head. The text I received from Jenna later confirmed exactly what she said, a line that sliced through the room louder than any scream. "So this is what you call family?" My mother's smile faltered. She looked around the table, her eyes darting from face to face, trying to gauge the temperature of the room. She saw the cousins looking down at their laps, ashamed. She saw the neighbors exchanging uncomfortable glances. Then, she looked at Evan. Evan was the focal point of my anxiety. I watched him stare at his phone. He didn't move for a long time. He just sat there, the device resting in his palm. Listening to the audio of my mother calling me a cockroach, listening to Wayne strategizing how to manipulate him and his father, he looked up. He didn't look at Bryn. He looked at the empty chair he was sitting in. He stood up. He was a tall man, and in the small dining room, he loomed over the table. He pushed the chair, my chair, away from the table with a screech of wood on wood that I imagined echoed through the entire house. He turned to my mother. His face was pale. He gestured to the seat he had just vacated. "Why did you give me her seat?" The question must have landed like a bomb. I saw my mother's mouth open and close. She reached out a hand toward him, a gesture of placation. But he took a step back. Wayne finally realized what was happening. He pulled his own phone out. I saw his face go slack as he saw the notification. The file. The sender. His head snapped up, looking toward the window. Looking out into the darkness where he knew I was watching. But he had lost the room. The dinner was dissolving. It wasn't a chaotic explosion. It was a structural failure. Jenna was already walking toward the hallway, grabbing her coat. Patrice was helping Grandma Maggie stand up. The cousins were awkwardly shuffling toward the door, avoiding eye contact with Wayne. Evan was the last to turn away. He looked at Bryn, who was sitting frozen, tears starting to track down her face. She reached for his hand, but he kept his arms at his sides. He said something low and final, then turned and walked toward the foyer. Wayne stood up then. I saw him shouting. His face was red, his veins bulging in his neck. He was waving his arms, trying to command them to stop, to sit, to finish the performance. He was the director of a play where the actors had suddenly decided to walk off stage into the audience, but no one turned back. The front door opened. The first group spilled out onto the porch. It was Jenna and Patrice, flanking Grandma Maggie like bodyguards. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Wayne. "You went too far." I looked at the message and felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no guilt, no desire to apologize. I looked back at the house. Wayne was standing in the window now, staring out at the street. He couldn't see me in the dark, but he knew I was there. He knew that the daughter he had dismissed as Sachu family had just dismantled his kingdom with a single tap of a finger. He had wanted to control the optics. He had wanted a perfect picture. Well, I had given him a new picture. I had given him the truth. And as I watched the taillights of Evan's car flare red as he backed out of the driveway, I knew that for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being left behind. They were. The silence in my car was short-lived. My phone, still resting on the passenger seat, began to seize like a living thing in the throes of a panic attack. It buzzed against the leather, walked in circles, and lit up the dark cabin with a strobe light effect of incoming notifications. The screen was a scrolling ticker of their unraveling. Incoming call. Mom. Missed call. Mom. Incoming call. Mom. Then came the texts from my sister. Bryn. They arrived in a frantic, blue-bubbled stream, devoid of punctuation or breath. Camilla. What did you do? Evan just walked out. Why would you ruin tonight? You know how important this is for Dad. Please just pick up. Mom is crying and floating at the top of the stack, like a tombstone, was the message from Wayne I had seen moments before. You went too far. I did not touch the phone. I let it vibrate. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, watching the front door of the house. It opened again, and a figure sprinted down the steps. It wasn't Evan this time. It was Jenna. She was clutching her coat around her shoulders, her movements jerky and adrenaline-fueled. She scanned the dark street, spotted my car, and ran toward me. She yanked the passenger door open and threw herself inside, bringing with her a gust of freezing wind and the faint scent of the roast turkey that would never be eaten. She slammed the door shut and exhaled a massive, shuddering breath that fogged up the window. "Holy hell," Jenna said. She turned to look at me, her eyes wide in the gloom. "They are melting down. I mean, literally melting down. It is like a nuclear reactor core just exposed to open air. "What is Wayne doing?" I asked. My voice was calm, shockingly so. It was the voice I used when presenting a grim audit report to a board of directors. Jenna laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "Oh, he is putting on a masterclass in damage control." As soon as Evan walked out, Wayne stood up and started shouting to anyone left, which was basically just Bryn and your mom, that you are unstable. He kept saying, "She records people. Who does that? Only paranoid people do that. She has deep psychological issues." I nodded slowly. Of course he did. "He is trying to make the medium the crime," Jenna continued, unbuttoning her coat. "He is not addressing what he said on the tape. He is not talking about the fact that he called you a cockroach, or that he planned to block the door. He is focusing entirely on the fact that you documented it. He is trying to convince Bryn that you are a predator who laid a trap, not a victim who finally bought a shield. Is it working? On Bryn? Maybe. She is a mess. She is just crying about the wedding. But on everyone else? No." Aunt Patrice looked at him like he was something she scraped off her shoe. "And Evan?" Jenna shook her head. Evan looked like he had just woken up from a coma and realized he was sleeping next to a stranger. He didn't even say goodbye to them. He just asked for his keys and left. I looked down at my phone. It was still buzzing. "They are not panicked because they hurt me." "Jenna," I said softly, "they have hurt me for decades. They sleep just fine when I'm in pain. They are panicked because they lost the rights to the story. Wayne cannot spin this. He cannot edit the audio file I just sent to 30 people. "It is glorious," Jenna said, leaning her head back against the headrest. "Terrifying, but glorious. You should have seen his face. Camila. He looked impotent. For the first time in his life, his money and his suit and his nice guy act could not fix the problem." My phone buzzed again with a different tone. A singular, heavy vibration that signaled a direct message from a priority contact. I glanced down. It was Evan. I picked up the phone, ignoring the 42 missed notifications from my mother. I opened Evan's thread. "I am so sorry." He wrote, "I did not know. I swear to you, I did not know about the door. I have felt like something was wrong in this house for a long time. Like I was watching a play where I did not have the script. Tonight I saw the script. I'm going to stay at a hotel. Please tell me you are safe." I felt a lump form in my throat. It was the first crack in my armor. Evan was a good man. He was collateral damage in my war against Wayne, and the guilt of that stung. I typed back, "I am safe. I am sorry you had to find out this way. But you needed to know who you were marrying." "Who is that?" Jenna asked. "Evan," I said. "He is apologizing." "He should," Jenna said fiercely. "He sat in your chair. He didn't know it was my chair." I defended him. "To him, it was just a seat. That is how Wayne operates. He makes the cruelty look like logistics." Before I could set the phone down, it rang again. This time, the name on the screen made my heart stop. Dad, not Wayne. Daniel Mercer, my biological father. Daniel had been a ghost in my life for 20 years. After the divorce, he had been browbeaten into submission by Kara's lawyers and Wayne's influence. He had retreated to a small house 2 towns over, paying his child support, but gradually fading from my daily existence. He was a man who avoided conflict the way other people avoided fire. He had always told me to just keep my head down and not make waves. I hadn't spoken to him in 6 months. I had added him to the group chat on a whim. Thinking he wouldn't even check it, I swiped green and put the phone to my ear. "Hello?" "Mila." His voice was unrecognizable. It was hoarse, thick with an emotion I couldn't place. It sounded like he had been weeping. "Dad?" "I listened to it," he said. He didn't say hello. "I listened to the whole thing, twice." "Okay," I whispered. "I let them do this," he said. The sorrow in his voice was so heavy it felt like it was pressing down on the roof of my car. "For years, I told you to be patient. I told you they meant well. I told you to respect Wayne because he stepped up when I couldn't financially." He took a ragged breath. "I was wrong. I was a coward. I let them treat you like a dog in the yard because I was too afraid to fight them. Dad, you don't have to. I should have protected you. He cut me off. The force of the statement made me flinch. I am your father. My job was to stand in the door, not him. I am so sorry. Mila, I am so goddamn sorry. Tears, hot and fast, finally spilled over my lashes. Wayne's cruelty hadn't made me cry. My mother's betrayal hadn't made me cry. But this sudden, raw accountability from the man who was supposed to be my first line of defense broke me. It is okay, Dad, I choked out. No, he said firmly. It is not okay, but I'm going to make it right. I am done being quiet. We hung up. I sat there, wiping my face with the back of my hand. Jenna reached over and squeezed my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She knew. My phone lit up again. Another text. Mom, we were keeping the peace. You embarrassed us in front of the Millers. You embarrassed your sister. How could you be so selfish? I stared at the words, even now, with the wreckage of her family smoking around her. She could not squeeze out a single drop of remorse. There was no I miss you. There was no I am sorry we hurt you. There was only the furious, narcissistic injury of having her mask slipped. She didn't care that she had broken my heart. She cared that I had broken her dinner party. The last thread of hope I had held on to, that tiny, foolish child inside me who thought maybe this would be a wake-up call for her, finally snapped. I typed my response slowly, savoring every letter. You did not want peace. You wanted my silence. Those are two very different things. I hit send. Then, I did something I should have done 10 years ago. I went to the settings of my phone, found her contact, and blocked her number. Good, Jenna said, watching over my shoulder. Block him too. I blocked Wayne. I blocked the house landline. I left Bryn unblocked, mostly out of pity, but I muted her notifications. It is done, I said, leaning back. The silence in the car felt different now. It wasn't the silence of waiting. It was the silence of aftermath. The bomb had gone off. The dust was settling. So, Jenna said, exhaling loudly, what now? Do we go get burgers? Do we get drunk? I was about to answer when my phone rang again. I frowned. The screen displayed a number I didn't recognize. It was a local area code, but not one stored in my contacts. Who is that? Jenna asked. I don't know, I said. Maybe it is a neighbor who saw the text. I picked it up. My guard raised, Hello? Is this Camilla Bishop? The voice was female, brisk, professional, and completely devoid of Thanksgiving warmth. It sounded like the voice of someone who billed by the hour. Yes, this is she. Ms. Bishop, my name is Maris Rowe. I am calling regarding your grandmother. Margaret Caldwell. My stomach dropped. Is she okay? Is she hurt? She is physically fine, the woman said. I am an attorney. I represent Mrs. Caldwell. She asked me to call you tonight if... Well, she gave me specific instructions to call you if there was a disturbance at the house. I looked at Jenna. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A disturbance? She sent me a text message 10 minutes ago. The lawyer continued. It just said, the door is closed. Call Camilla. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. I don't understand. Why would she call you? Because, Ms. Bishop, Maris Rowe said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming serious and confidential. Your grandmother has been trying to reach you for weeks, but she suspected her calls were being intercepted. We have a meeting scheduled for Monday regarding the restructuring of her estate, but given the events of tonight, I think we need to move that up. Move it up to when? I asked. Tonight, Rose said. I am at my office. I have the files that Wayne Harlan has been trying to suppress. And if you are who your grandmother says you are the only person who can stop what he is about to do on Monday morning. I sat up straighter. The tears were gone. The daughter was gone. The auditor was back online. I know exactly what files you are talking about, I said. I saw them on the hall table under a beige scarf. Then you know we don't have time to waste, Rose said. Can you come to my office? It is on 4th Street. I am on my way, I said. I hung up the phone and turned to Jenna. My hand was steady as I put the car into gear. Buckle up, I said to her. We are not getting burgers. What is happening? Jenna asked. Grabbing the dashboard as I pulled the car away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror at the house on the hill. The lights were still on, but it looked smaller now. It looked like a trap I had finally chewed my leg free from. Wayne thinks this was about a dinner, I said, pressing my foot down on the accelerator. He is about to find out it is a foreclosure. Maris Rowe's office was located on the 4th floor of a brutalist concrete building that looked like it had been designed to withstand a siege. It was fitting. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of stale coffee and laser printer toner. There were no holiday decorations here, no wreaths, no pumpkins, no warm lighting. It was a sterile operating theater for the law. And right now, my family was the patient on the table. Jenna and I sat in 2 stiff leather chairs across from Maris. The attorney was a sharp-featured woman in her late 50s with glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. She did not offer us water. She did not offer condolences for our ruined holiday. She simply opened a thick file folder on her desk and rotated it so I could see the header. Your grandmother retained my firm 6 months ago, Maris said, her voice dry and precise. She was concerned. She felt that her memory was slipping. Yes, but she also felt that her confusion was being encouraged. She used the phrase gaslighting, though I'm not sure she fully understood the modern context of the word. She just knew she was being told she had had conversations she did not remember having. I leaned forward, the leather of the chair creaking. She told me she was signing things, I said. She told me she felt like she was signing her name all day long. She was, Maris confirmed. She pulled a document from the stack. Wayne Harlan has been very busy. He has been acting as an informal intermediary for her estate planning. He told her that he was simplifying her assets, consolidating accounts to save on fees. He told her it was just administrative cleanup. But it wasn't, I said. It wasn't a question. No, Maris said. It was a funnel. We have been tracking the paperwork he has been filing. Up until now, it has been minor. Changing a beneficiary on a small insurance policy here, moving a savings account there, nothing that would trigger an immediate fraud alert, but enough to test the waters. He was seeing what he could get away with. He was testing the perimeter defenses. Jenna shifted in her seat. So why tonight? She asked. Why the big show at the door? Why block Camila specifically? Maris looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Because, Ms. Bishop, you are the only person in that family who reads the fine print. Wayne knows what you do for a living. He knows you work in compliance. He knows you look for discrepancies for a paycheck. To him, you are not just an unwanted stepdaughter. You are a professional auditor. The realization hit me so hard, I actually stopped breathing for a moment. I thought back to the door. I thought back to Wayne's rigid posture, the way he blocked my view of the foyer. I remembered the table behind him, the blue folders, the beige cashmere scarf he had thrown over them with such frantic speed. The papers, I whispered. I saw them, in the foyer. There was a stack of legal documents on the entry table. He covered them up the second he saw me looking. That matches our timeline, Maris said. She tapped a finger on the desk. We believe Wayne is trying to get Maggie to sign a durable power of attorney. Not the limited kind she has now for medical decisions, but a full, unrestricted financial power of attorney. It would give him total control over her accounts, her real estate, and her investments. He could liquidate everything without her permission. And he needed her to sign it tonight, I said, the pieces locking together in my mind like the tumblers of a safe. Thanksgiving, when everyone is distracted, when everyone is drinking wine, when the mood is high and the defenses are low. Exactly, Maris said. He probably framed it as something trivial, a tax document. A permission slip for the gardener. He just needed her signature. But why keep me out? I asked, though I was starting to see the answer. I wouldn't have been looking at the papers during dinner. He couldn't take the risk, Maris said. If you were inside the house, there was a chance, however small, that you would sit with Maggie, that she would mention the paperwork to you, that you would ask to see it, that you would recognize a power of attorney form from 10 feet away because you see them every day at work. You were the variable he could not control, so he removed you from the equation. Jenna gasped. She turned to me, her eyes wide. Camilla, remember before dinner? I was in the kitchen helping Bryn with the rolls. Wayne came in and whispered something to your mom. I didn't hear the whole thing, but I heard him say, "Tonight must be smooth, no friction, no Camilla." I thought he just meant he didn't want you upsetting people. But he meant he didn't want you auditing the transaction. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. It was a different kind of anger than I had felt in the driveway. That was the anger of a hurt child. This was the anger of a professional who had just discovered a massive regulatory breach. I suspected it, I admitted, my voice steady. I saw weird transactions on Grandma's account statements when I helped her organize her mail last month. Withdrawals for $400, $500, cash, just under the radar. But I couldn't prove it was him. I thought maybe she was just spending cash. I lacked the link. The power of attorney is the link, Maris said grimly. If he gets that signature tonight, those little withdrawals turn into massive transfers. He can empty the trust. He can sell the house. She leaned forward, her expression severe. And here's the kicker. Ms. Bishop, Monday is the first banking day after the holiday. If he has that document signed tonight, he will be at the county clerk's office and the bank at 9 in the morning on Monday, once that document is filed and recorded. Unwinding it takes months of litigation. By the time we get a court order to freeze the assets, the money will be in a shell company in the Cayman Islands. If he gets what he's filing, Monday everything changes. The room went silent. The hum of the computer server in the corner seemed to get louder. Monday. He wasn't just kicking me out of a family dinner. He was racing against a clock. The "you are not family" line wasn't just an insult. It was a tactical maneuver. He needed me gone so he could rob an 80-year-old woman while she ate pumpkin pie. He played us, Jenna said, her voice shaking. He used the whole Camilla is difficult narrative to cover a heist. He made us all complicit. We all just sat there eating turkey while he was probably sliding a contract under Maggie's nose between courses. I looked at the file on the desk. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 8 in the evening. Dinner was over. The guests would be leaving soon. Wayne probably had the signature in his pocket right now. He was probably pouring himself a celebratory scotch, thinking he had won. He thought the worst thing I could do was send a group text. He thought I was just a bitter stepdaughter with a smartphone. He had forgotten who I really was. I stood up. My legs felt solid. My hands were not shaking. He thinks he has won because the door is closed, I said. He thinks because I am outside, I am powerless. Legally, you are limited, Maris warned, without Maggie revoking the signature or without proof of coercion. I don't need to prove coercion to a judge yet. I cut her off. I just need to get to the client. I looked at Maris. You said you have the paperwork to revoke his authority? To update her representation? I do, Maris said, tapping a folder. I drafted it weeks ago when Maggie first called me. It revokes all prior powers of attorney and appoints a new agent, but it is useless without her signature. And I cannot walk into that house. I am not family. I would be trespassing. I am not family either, I said, the words tasting different now, less like a wound and more like a weapon. According to Wayne, I am a stranger. But you know who is family? Who has a key? Who is currently sitting in my car? I looked at Jenna. She stood up slowly, a slow grin spreading across her face. I have a key to the back patio door, Jenna said. And I know for a fact that Wayne smokes his cigars on the front porch after dinner. We are going back, I said. Maris Rose stood up. She picked up the folder containing the revocation documents. She didn't look like a lawyer anymore. She looked like a general handing over the ammunition. "If you can get her to sign this," Maris said, handing me the folder, "bring it back to me immediately. I will notarize it. I will file a preemptive block on Monday morning, but you have to get to her before he isolates her again." I took the folder. It felt heavy, heavier than the bottle of wine I had carried up the driveway. "He wanted a quiet night," I said, turning to the door. "He wanted to control the story. He is about to find out that when you redact the truth, it has a nasty habit of showing up in the audit." I looked at Jenna. "Let's go get Grandma." We walked out of the office and into the cold night air. The wind was biting, but I didn't feel it. I wasn't Camilla, the rejected daughter, anymore. I was the lead investigator on the biggest case of my life, and I was going to crash the party one last time. The drive away from Maris Rowe's office felt less like a commute and more like a tactical extraction. My phone was mounted on the dashboard, and it was lighting up with the frantic, strobing rhythm of a glow stick in a dark room. Wayne had launched his counteroffensive. He wasn't fighting with facts because he didn't have any. Instead, he was fighting with mud. He was scorching the earth. A notification popped up from my cousin Sarah, who lived 3 states away and wasn't even at the dinner. "Camilla, Uncle Wayne just called Mom. He says you had a breakdown. He said something about you using AI to fake a voice recording. Are you okay? Do you need help?" I let out a dry, sharp laugh. "He is telling people it is deep fake audio," I said to Jenna, my eyes on the road. "He is telling them I manufactured the recording of him calling me a cockroach." Jenna looked at the screen, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light. "He is desperate," she said. "He knows the audio is real. He knows we know it is real. He is just trying to muddy the water enough so that by Monday morning, the bank manager hesitates just long enough for him to clear the accounts." Then came the text from my mother. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an explanation. It was a summons. "Camilla, stop this immediately. Come back to the house. We need to talk privately. Just family. We can fix this." Talk privately. I knew exactly what that meant. In the Harlan Dictionary, privately meant in a room without witnesses where we can bully you until you recant. They wanted to get me back behind that closed door. They wanted to confiscate my phone, delete the files, and gaslight me until I agreed that I was the crazy one. They wanted to offer me a settlement, maybe pay off my car, maybe a down payment on a house, in exchange for my silence and the destruction of the evidence. "I am not going back to that house," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "Not while he controls the doors." "We don't need to," Jenna said, checking her own phone. "I just got a text from Aunt Patrice. She took Grandma out of there the second the shouting started. She drove her back to the Meadows." The Meadows was the assisted living facility where Maggie had her own apartment. It was 10 minutes away. It was neutral ground. And most importantly, Wayne wasn't there. "Is Wayne still at the big house?" I asked. "Patrice says yes," Jenna confirmed. "He is holding court, trying to calm Evan down, good luck with that, and yelling at your mom. He thinks he has contained the damage. He thinks you are just driving around crying." "Good," I said, taking a sharp left turn. "Let him think I am crying. I am actually headhunting." We pulled into the parking lot of the Meadows under the cover of a freezing drizzle. The building was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the dinner party we had left behind. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hush. We signed in at the front desk. The night nurse knew me. I visited Maggie every Tuesday. She didn't ask why I was there at 9 o'clock on Thanksgiving night with a lawyer's folder tucked under my arm. She just buzzed us through. We found Maggie in her sitting room. Aunt Patrice was there, sitting on the edge of the sofa, looking exhausted. When she saw us, Patrice stood up and exhaled, a sound like a tire finally letting out air. "She is confused," Patrice whispered, stepping into the hallway to meet us. "She keeps asking why Wayne was so angry. She keeps asking if she did something wrong." "She didn't do anything wrong," I said firmly. She was the mark. I walked into the room. Maggie was sitting in her favorite armchair, wrapped in a knitted shawl. She looked smaller than she had a few hours ago. The matriarch facade that the family liked to parade around was gone, leaving behind a tired, 82-year-old woman who was trying to piece together a reality that kept shifting under her feet. "Mila?" She squinted at me. "Is the dinner over?" "Yes, Grandma," I said softly. Pulling a chair close to her, Jenna stood behind me, a silent sentry. "The dinner is over." I took her hand. Her skin was paper-thin, terrified and fragile. "Grandma, I need to ask you something. It is important. Do you remember signing some papers for Wayne earlier today? Maybe before people arrived?" Maggie frowned. Her eyes darted to the side, looking for an answer in the empty air. "The medical forms," she said. Her voice was trembling. "He said they were for the insurance, for my hip surgery next month." I felt a spike of adrenaline. "Did you read them?" "He was in a rush," she whispered. "He said the notary was waiting in the car. He said if I didn't sign them, the insurance would deny the claim. I didn't have my glasses. Mila, I asked him to read them to me, but he said there wasn't time." She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. "I signed a lot of pages. My hand hurt. I don't remember what I gave away. Mila. But I remember I was afraid. I remember thinking he looked hungry." That was it, the confirmation. He had lied about the content of the documents. He had used urgency and fear, the threat of losing medical care, to coerce her into signing away her financial freedom. It wasn't just unethical, it was predatory. I opened the folder Maris Rowe had given me. Inside was the revocation of power of attorney and the designation of new agent. It was a shield, waiting to be raised. "Grandma," I said, keeping my voice level, "Wayne didn't give you medical forms. He gave you papers that let him take your money. He wants to control everything you own." Maggie stopped breathing for a second. She pulled her hand back, clutching her shawl. He is my son-in-law. He handles the bills." "He handles the bills because he wants the money," Jenna said from behind me. Her voice was gentle but unyielding. "He blocked Camilla from the house tonight because he was afraid she would tell you that." Maggie looked from Jenna to me. She looked at the folder in my lap. She was processing the betrayal, the cracks in the happy family story she had been force-fed for decades. "I have papers here, Grandma," I said. "These papers stop him. They take the power away from him. But you have to sign them, and you have to trust me." I didn't push the pen into her hand. I didn't use the tactics Wayne used. I didn't mention time limits or emergencies. I simply asked the question that Maris had told me to ask. "Do you feel safe with him?" The room went silent. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Maggie looked down at her hands. She thought about the hushed conversations she had been excluded from. She thought about the way Wayne spoke over her. She thought about the fear she felt when he stood over her with a pen. She looked up. Her eyes were clear. The fog of confusion burned away by a sudden, sharp clarity. "No," she said. "I do not." She reached out and took the pen from my hand. "I am tired of being told what to do with my own life. I want to choose my own family." She signed. Her signature was shaky, the loops of the M slightly uneven, but it was legible. She signed the revocation. Then, on the second line, she appointed the new agent. She didn't ask who it should be. She just wrote the name she trusted, Camilla Bishop. I watched the ink dry. A wave of emotion hit me, hot and overwhelming. For 30 years, I had begged for a seat at their table. I had desperate for a scrap of their validation. And now, in a quiet room smelling of lavender and antiseptic, I realized I didn't need their table. I was the head of the table now. I took the papers and placed them back in the folder. I felt a weight settle onto my shoulders. But it wasn't the crushing weight of rejection. It was the grounding weight of responsibility. I was no longer the victim. I was the protector. "We have it," I said to Jenna. He doesn't know, Jenna said, a dark smile playing on her lips. He is probably at the house right now, toasting himself. He thinks he has the golden ticket in his briefcase. He thinks Monday morning is going to be his coronation. He is going to walk into the bank on Monday, I said, standing up. And he is going to find out that the locks have been changed. I kissed Maggie on the forehead. You are safe now. Grandma, Patrice is going to stay with you tonight. I have to go deliver this. Go, Maggie said. She looks stronger already. And Mila? Yes? Don't knock when you go to court, she said, a hint of her old steel returning to her voice. Kick the door down. I walked out of the meadows with the folder held tight against my chest. My phone was still buzzing in my pocket. Kara, Bryn, Wayne, but their noise didn't matter anymore. They were fighting a PR war on social media. I had just won the war on paper. I got back into the car. To the lawyer's office, I told Jenna. Let's file this before he even wakes up. The night was dark, but for the first time in years, the road ahead was perfectly clear. Wayne Harlan had blocked a door to keep me out. But he had forgotten one crucial thing about houses. They have windows, they have chimneys, and they have foundations, and while he was guarding the front entrance, I had just walked away with the deed. Saturday morning arrived with a gray, leaden sky that matched the atmosphere in my stomach. The text from my mother had come in at 8 o'clock. It was not a request. It was a summons disguised as an olive branch. Meet us at the conference room at the Hyatt on Main. 11 o'clock. Just us. We need to talk like adults and put this behind us. They chose a hotel. Of course they did. They wanted neutral ground. A place where I couldn't make a scene without embarrassing myself. A place that felt official enough to intimidate me but private enough to coerce me. They thought they were inviting a broken daughter to a negotiation table where they held all the leverage. They thought I would come alone, desperate for forgiveness, ready to trade the audio files for a return to the fold. They were wrong. I walked into the hotel lobby at 10:55. I was wearing my best suit, a sharp navy blazer that I usually reserved for aggressive board meetings. I was not alone. To my left walked Jenna, her face set in grim determination. To my right walked Maris Rowe, carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to bludgeon someone with. And walking a few paces behind us, looking pale but resolved, was Evan. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet, lined with generic abstract art and the smell of industrial carpet cleaner. We found the room. Suite B. The door was closed. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open and walked in. Wayne and Kara were sitting at a long mahogany table. They had positioned themselves at the head, leaving a single chair on the opposite side. A visual interrogation setup. When the door opened, Wayne put on his best sympathetic smile, the one he used when firing employees. Camilla, he began, his voice dripping with faux concern. I am glad you decided to be sensible. We were so worried. He stopped. He saw Jenna. Then he saw the lawyer. And finally, he saw Evan. The smile vanished. It didn't fade. It was deleted. What is this? Wayne stood up, bracing his hands on the table. I said private. I said family only. This is family, I said, my voice calm. I walked to the table, but I didn't sit in the chair they had assigned me. I stood at the opposite end, mirroring his stance. And this is my counsel. Since you like legal documents so much, I thought I would bring a professional. This is ridiculous, my mother hissed. She looked at Evan, her eyes narrowing. Evan, what are you doing with her? You are upsetting Bryn. She has been crying all night. Bryn is not here? I asked. She is in the restroom, Kara snapped. She is devastated, because of you. Let us stop the drama, Wayne cut in, waving a hand dismissively. He adjusted his cufflinks, trying to regain control of the room. Camila, you are clearly emotional. You lashed out last night. We understand. You have always been fragile. We are willing to overlook the recording. We are willing to forget the little stunt with the group text. But you need to hand over the phone and you need to sign a statement retracting those lies." He looked at me with the confidence of a man who thinks he has locked every exit. He thought he had the power of attorney in his pocket. He thought he owned Maggie, and by extension, the narrative. I looked at him. I didn't blink. I reached into my bag and pulled out the packet I had assembled at Kinko's at 6 in the morning. It was bound with a thick clip. I dropped it on the table. It landed with a heavy, flat thud that echoed in the quiet room. "I am not retracting anything," I said. "I am adding to the record." Wayne stared at the packet. "What is that?" "That," I said, pointing to the first tab, "is a timeline of every withdrawal you have made from Grandma Maggie's accounts in the last 6 months. Cash, transfers, consulting fees paid to an LLC registered in your name." Wayne's face twitched. "You have been spying on us?" "I have been auditing you," I corrected. "And this," I pointed to the second tab, "is a transcript of the audio file where you discussed isolating Maggie to get her signature. And this," I flipped to the back, revealing the document with the wet ink signature we had obtained last night, "is the revocation of power of attorney, signed by Margaret Caldwell, dated yesterday at 9:30 at night." Wayne froze. He looked at the paper. He looked at the signature. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a time-lapse video of decay. This is fake," he stammered. "She is incompetent. She doesn't know what she signed." "She was lucid enough to know she doesn't trust you," Maris Rowe spoke up. Her voice was sharp steel. "And since I notarized it myself, I can testify to her state of mind. As of last night, you have no authority. Mr. Harlan, you are just a man who tried to steal from an elderly woman." Wayne looked up, his eyes darting around the room. Looking for a weapon, he pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are recording again, aren't you? That is all you do. You trap people." "No," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I am documenting. There is a difference. You record to manipulate. I record to survive." The door to the restroom opened, and Bryn walked out. Her eyes were red and puffy. She stopped when she saw the crowded room. She saw Evan standing near the door. "Evan?" she whispered. "You came back?" Evan stepped forward. He didn't look at her with love. He looked at her with pity. "I didn't come back for the wedding, Bryn," Evan said. His voice was quiet but steady. "I came to tell the truth." "What truth?" Bryn asked. Looking at our mother, Evan turned to Wayne. "Tell her, Wayne, tell her what you offered me in the driveway 2 weeks ago." Wayne glared at him. "Shut up, Evan. Don't be an idiot." "He offered to pay off my student loans," Evan said. Ignoring him, he looked directly at Bryn. "He told me he would write a check for $40,000 if I promised to manage you. He said you were high maintenance, just like your mother, and that I would need financial incentive to stick around." Bryn made a sound like she had been punched in the stomach. She turned to our mother. "Mom, you knew?" Kara looked away. That was the answer. "Mom said if Camilla shows up, she will ruin everything," Bryn screamed, the tears starting again. "She said Camilla is poison, like she always does." "Your mother," Maris Rowe interjected, stepping forward and placing a hand on the table, "is also a signatory on these withdrawal slips, which makes her a co-conspirator." Kara went pale. I just signed where Wayne told me to. I didn't know." "Your signature is on the paper, Mrs. Harlan," Rowe said. "In the eyes of the law, ignorance is not an exemption from fraud." Wayne slammed his hand on the table. "Enough," he shouted. The veneer of the polite businessman cracked completely, revealing the cornered animal underneath. "This is a family meeting. You cannot come in here with fake lawyers and disgruntled ex-fiancés and threaten me. I built this family. I pay for everything. You are nothing but a jealous, ungrateful little—" He started to move toward me. He looked ready to physically throw me out of the room, but before he could take a second step, there was a sharp knock on the conference room door. It opened immediately. A man in a cheap gray suit walked in. He held a stack of papers in his hand. He wasn't a guest. He wasn't family. He was the punctuation mark I had been waiting for. He looked at the photo on the top sheet, then looked up at the man standing at the head of the table. "Wayne Harlan?" the man asked. Wayne blinked, disoriented. "What? Yes. Who are you?" The man walked forward and thrust the papers into Wayne's chest. Wayne instinctively grabbed them. "You are served," the man said. "Subpoena for financial records and a temporary restraining order regarding the assets of Margaret Caldwell." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the rustle of the papers in Wayne's shaking hands. Wayne looked at the subpoena. Then he looked at me, for the first time in 34 years. He didn't look at me with contempt or dismissal. He looked at me with fear. He realized then what I had known since I sat in my car the night before. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. He couldn't fix this with a mood or a dinner party or a locked door. "You," Wayne whispered, "you brought the police?" "No," I said, picking up my bag. "I brought the consequences. You wanted to play games with the door, Wayne. So I decided to use the legal system to weld it shut." I turned to Evan. "Are you coming?" Evan nodded. He took off the engagement ring he was still wearing on a chain around his neck and placed it gently on the table next to the packet of evidence. He didn't say a word to Bryn. He just walked out. I looked at my mother one last time. She was staring at the subpoena in Wayne's hand, looking like a statue of a woman realizing her pedestal was made of sand. "Goodbye, Mother," I said. "Enjoy the reading material." I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking on the floor. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The sound of Wayne starting to scream at his lawyer on the phone was the only closing music I needed. The legal conclusion to the Harlan family drama did not happen in a courtroom with a banging gavel. It happened in a sterile mediation room 3 months later, under the hum of fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly green. Wayne sat on one side of the long oak table. He looked smaller than I remembered. The swagger was gone, replaced by the twitchy, hollow look of a man who knows his bank accounts are frozen. My mother sat next to him, staring at her hands. She wore black, as if she were mourning a death, though the only thing that had died was her social standing in Greystone Ridge. Maris Rowe laid the forensic accounting report on the table. It was 3 inches thick. "We have traced the transfers," Maris said, her voice devoid of emotion. "The consulting fees paid to the shell company in Delaware, the unauthorized withdrawals from the trust, the attempt to liquidate the portfolio using a coerced signature." Wayne tried to speak. He tried to pull up the old charm, the voice that had smoothed over 1,000 awkward dinners. "It was estate planning," he rasped. "I was protecting the assets for the family, for Bryn, for the wedding." Bryn was sitting in the corner. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked at Wayne with a cold, dawning realization. "Don't put this on me," Bryn said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "You told me you were paying for the wedding because you loved me. You were stealing from Grandma to pay for the caterer?" "I did it for us," Wayne snapped, turning on her. "Do you think this lifestyle is free? Do you think your mother's country club dues pay for themselves? I was managing the cash flow. If Camilla hadn't interfered—" "If I hadn't interfered," I interrupted, "Grandma would be destitute, and you would be in the Cayman Islands." The mediator cleared his throat. "Mr. Harlan, given the evidence of elder financial abuse and the revocation of the power of attorney, we are moving to place all of Mrs. Caldwell's assets into an irrevocable trust. You will be removed as executor. You will repay the $150,000 you borrowed within 60 days, or we will press criminal charges." Wayne slumped in his chair. It was over. But the biggest blow didn't come from the accountant. It came from Maggie herself. She wasn't there in person. Her doctor advised against the stress. But she had sent a letter. Maris Rowe opened the envelope. The sound of tearing paper was the only noise in the room. "Mrs. Caldwell asked me to read this into the record," Maris said, "to my family." The letter began. "For years, I let you tell me that Camilla was the problem. You told me she was difficult. You told me she was cold. You told me she didn't fit in. I see now that you were right, but not in the way you meant." Morris paused, looking directly at my mother. "Camilla didn't fit in because she was the only one I couldn't buy, and the only one Wayne couldn't scare. That is why you kept her at the end of the table. You weren't punishing her for being bad. You were punishing her for being observant. You needed her gone because she was the only one who would notice when the spoons went missing." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. "Camilla is not just my granddaughter." The letter ended. "She is my protector. And from this day forward, she is the only person who speaks for me." My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Camilla, please, we can fix this. We can go to therapy. I am your mother." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had moved my chair to make room for a guest. I looked at the woman who had smiled while her husband blocked the door. "You are my mother," I said. "But you are also his accomplice. You watched him do it, Mom. You watched him gaslight Grandma, and you watched him bully me, and you said nothing because you liked the heated seats in your new car." "I was afraid," she whispered. "So was I said, "but I showed up." I stood up. "You don't get access to me just because you share my blood. That access is revoked." Evan was waiting in the lobby when I walked out. He wasn't there for Bryn. He had broken off the engagement 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. He looked tired, but he looked free. "I just wanted to say goodbye," Evan said. "And thank you." "Thank you?" I asked. "I ruined your wedding." "You saved me from a divorce," he corrected. "I saw the future. Camilla, I saw myself turning into Wayne. I saw myself sitting at that table 10 years from now, lying to my kids, moving chairs around to keep the peace. I didn't want that life." He shook my hand. It was a firm, honest grip. Then he walked out the revolving doors, into a life that was messy and uncertain, but entirely his own. Wayne lost everything. Not just the money, though the repayment plan bled him dry. He lost the audience. The story got out. Greystone Ridge is a small town, and scandal travels faster than light. He was no longer the benevolent patriarch. He was the man who tried to rob his senile mother-in-law. He was the man who blocked the door on his own stepdaughter. The narrative flipped. He wasn't the victim of a crazy daughter. He was the villain of a police report. Thanksgiving the following year was different. There were no crystal chandeliers. There was no catering staff. There was no performance. I hosted it at my condo. The table was a mishmash of furniture. My dining table pushed together with a folding card table I borrowed from a neighbor. The tablecloth was a simple white linen. Jenna was in the kitchen, laughing as she tried to carve the turkey. Aunt Patrice was pouring wine, a bottle she bought herself, not one Wayne selected to impress anyone. Grandma Maggie sat in the most comfortable armchair, holding a glass of sparkling cider. She looked frail, but her eyes were bright. She was safe. Her assets were locked in a trust that I managed with the oversight of a third-party firm. No one could touch her. I walked to the table to set down the platter of roasted vegetables. "Okay, everyone, sit wherever you want," I called out. Jenna walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She was holding a single name card. It was handwritten in marker on a piece of construction paper. She walked to the head of the table. She placed the card down on the plate at the very center. It read, "Camilla." "Sit," Jenna commanded, pointing to the chair. "Center seat, no arguments." I looked at the chair. For 35 years. I had been the rough draft. I had been the extra. I had been the person standing on the porch looking in. I sat down. I looked around the table. These were the people who had answered the text. These were the people who had walked out of the house with me. They weren't perfect. We were loud. The turkey was a little dry. The apartment was too small. But it was real. I looked at the front door of my condo. It was unlocked. It would always be unlocked for the people who told the truth. I took a sip of my wine and smiled. I finally understood that family isn't the people who lock you out to keep the peace. Family are the people who help you kick the door down. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that cold porch to this warm table, and I'm grateful I could share it with you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. Are you listening while driving, cooking dinner, or just relaxing at home? I would love to hear your thoughts on Wayne and whether you think I did the right thing. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Morgan Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people who might need to hear it. See you in the next story.